Isn't it amazing?
It is to me.
How non-actors. It's very hard for actors to act. And when you see, you know, I always think it's incredible on television. You're flicking through. You can tell immediately if you're watching, even if 10 seconds, 5 seconds, you can tell if it's a real person standing there talking about, you know, their flat just having been burgled or something, or if it's an actor acting. Immediate. That's what I watch all the time at these reality shows like Cops and indeed Court TV, because the real, and you watch it as an actor because how do they do it? They're so good at it. How do they do it?
I noticed
the ones
something.
who are lying, and of course the ones who are absolutely not lying. But the ones who are lying, in a way, are more mesmerizing than the ones who are telling the truth.
When I go to the theater, if I can see the acting, I already don't like it. In other words, if it's the performer and his mind and his speculations and what he fixes and arranges is visible to me, it's bad acting, in my opinion. When I believe that there's a human being in action up there, in that moment, alive, right there and then, I get spellbound. Now, to achieve that is, to me, harder than playing an instrument. It's harder than fiddle, it's harder than dancing, it's harder than all the other performing arts, in my opinion. When you really achieve that understanding of human beings, that ability to place yourself into the shoes of another human being and reveal that life on stage, it's to me the ultimate experience.
There's something particular that goes on in a theatre, a live theatre, which is that if we do it well enough and all of you are focusing on the story at the same time, then there's what I would call a collective consciousness comes into the room. So it always moves, doesn't it, from unconsciousness to consciousness to unconsciousness, that goes round. I don't think of the imagination as a purely self-generating feature of the mind. I think the imagination also receives ideas. I don't know where they come from, and maybe they just come from my own unconscious. I certainly get ideas when I play that are better than I could have thought up if I actively just tried to do the work. So to some degree, the work in rehearsals is like preparing the ground for planting a bunch of vegetables. You just got to turn it, make sure it's fertilized, you know, and plant the things at the right depth, make sure it's watered, and then the things you planted come up, and a load of other things you didn't, sometimes weeds come up as well. So the exercise is really just turning them round and trying to keep them happy with the questions rather than leaping to answers, and hopefully those questions remain into the performance with you.
Tribute to my feelings about the theater and what the theater can do when it's really done well. And, you know, to do a show 8 times a week is a huge commitment. You give up your life to that. And so you really have to believe in what you're doing in the play, and certainly with this play, when I read it, it really touched my heart.
When I'm reading the script and I feel like I know exactly what it would look like if somebody felt that way. That was a whole part of my brain that I didn't even know existed, something that I could be confident in, and I didn't want to let it go. It's so hard to explain. It was just an overwhelming feeling of, I get this. This is what I was meant to do. And to get people to try to understand that when you're 14 years old, wanting to drop out of school and do this, and your parents are just like, you're out of your mind. I wanted to forge my own path. I found what I wanted to do, and I didn't want anything getting in the way of it. Even friends for many years were not as important to me as my career. I mean, from the age of 14.
The life of an actor, especially at the beginning, feels solitary, and you're going up for auditions and going up for different parts, and repeatedly are politely declined, sometimes impolitely declined, often. And the door will be closed in your face and you won't know why. And that moment is always a puzzling one, because the natural instinct is to take it personally. And often the decision isn't personal. But you feel as though, I certainly felt as though I had failed, and you can get very despondent. The challenge is to find a way of negotiating that sense of rejection, that sense of failure, without it eroding your sense of self and your own specific talent and your own curiosity in the work. I think it doesn't matter at what stage you're at in your creative life or in your career, but people will always have an idea of who they think you are, and often it's inaccurate or not wholly accurate, and you mustn't let them change your own sense of who you are. You have to plough your own furrow, because only you know, and only you know what you had to go through to deliver that performance in that audition or on that stage or in that short film or television series. And protect that with everything you have, because all those people who think they know who you are didn't do the work, and they don't know.
Now looking back, I feel like I do have some advice about this audition thing, which is that, you know, it's really, really hard, if not impossible, not to take it personally when you're not cast in something. When you go in there and you open your heart and you give it your best shot, and you know, you do your best in that room, and sometimes it's really difficult when it's just a casting person reading with you and not an actor or whatever. There's a couple of tips I have in regards to that, but what you realize from being in the room when you're on the other side of the table is it really isn't about you. It's not a personal thing. It's just about, they have this agenda, they see the character in a certain way, and they're either going to get that from you or they're not. And it's not your fault. They might just have a different idea in their head than the kind of energy that you're bringing. Now, if you're really clever, you can figure out in the moment, what is this thing they're looking for? You can ask beforehand, you can do some sort of intel beforehand and try to get yourself to that place that they're looking for. But a lot of times it's hard to tell what they're looking for. You know, so what a casting person or an agent tell you beforehand could be wrong, you know? And so you just have to surrender yourself, forgive yourself for failing, and just say, it's not because I was bad. It's not because I didn't do a good job in the audition, although sometimes there are. If you're late or you fuck up or you are unprepared, then yeah, that's a mistake. Correct it next time. But most of the time, it's not your fault. It's like, I don't know, it's like picking out a shirt or something. It's like, how do you want to feel that day? You put that shirt on, that's the right shirt. Is it because the other shirts are bad? No, it's just because there weren't the shirts you wanted to wear that day.
Acting is a very delicate business. And if you don't have the right temperament for it, it could hurt you. And we've certainly seen a lot of examples of that, where people don't handle it correctly.
It can swallow you up.
Yeah, their ego gets too big, or they get too depressed, or
they can't handle
too
the pressure.
high, too low, you know, and you really have to maintain a nice, steady foundation. And I always tell young actors that it's, if you want to try this business, get your personal life in order. Make that your foundation. And
that's great advice.
And then you can fly.
These characters have gone through so much, so they're also, I feel like performance-wise, it can be a little emotionally taxing. But it's, I think what is the most challenging is also the most rewarding, which is all the physical activity that we get to do, the adventures that we get to go on because of the adventures our characters are going on, and also just like exploring a lot of like emotional depth. Yeah, I find that to be very cathartic. And I feel like our characters, and I speak for myself, but I think also the rest of the cast, I feel like our characters have taught us something too. There's a certain level of physicality that usually I think goes with the work. I grew up watching each and every one of them as actors and admiring their work. I was so mainly just honored that he trusted me with the role and the presence of actors and artists at that level. But I had to give myself a pep talk in the mirror every day before I went to set, and it taught me a lot about preparation. It taught me a lot about myself, how to show up for myself, show up for the work.
Actors are sometimes undisciplined enough not to go home and go to sleep at night and learn their lines, and they go out. You cannot act without knowing dialogue. If you have to think about anything when you're acting, you cannot work on the emotion. It's happened on every film. There's not much you can do about it. You can fire them on day one. When you get into day 12. You know, you can threaten them, you can cajole them, you can try to appeal to their sense of what reputation they're creating among the crew. And so you wind up, say, with this particular actor, you know, maybe doing 30 takes of something. Then the guy goes back to America, and if he's nice, he says, oh boy, Stanley's such a perfectionist. He does 100 takes on every scene. I had to do this thing, you know, 100 times. So the 30 becomes 100. And of course, they never say why you did so many takes. I don't do a lot of takes when it's good.
I always feel like I don't know enough. I always think I don't know as much as everybody. I don't know enough. It's the thing that goes on in my head all the time, because I'm not naturally sort of an intellectual person at all. I'm not really well read. I still find grammar difficult to understand. I really think deeply about every word, every sentence. It's just an incredible ocean of stuff that you just pick apart three words or one sentence, and there's just so much in it, and you can be reading around that sentence for a long, long time. So I allowed myself the luxury of just making sure I understood. My mantra is like, if I haven't done enough, I'm not ready. I haven't done enough, I'm not ready. That's like, and my husband's like, oh God, you know, that's my constant thing. But I was exactly the point I needed to be. I mean, I already knew it all, but wasn't trying to learn it, just from going through it so many times. I'd done a lot of work, and then I feel slightly embarrassed when I get in there. I think, I've done so much work, but keep it quiet. I've done so much work. But my main thing is, once I get there, I literally just throw it all away. I barely look at anything notes I've made ever again. It's only done before I start rehearsal, and then I just leave it at home. And somehow, what sticks, what doesn't. And I start afresh with the director and the cast, and just really live. Because I love rehearsal so much, and it's all about playing. And I think if I hadn't done that work beforehand, I wouldn't be able to play. And that's my favourite thing to do, is to really have quite a lot of fun and play. I don't take it very seriously, but that's my favourite thing to do.
When you watch your fellow colleagues working, don't be judgmental. Don't say, oh, I like his work, or I don't like her work, or you know, your own. It teaches you nothing. If you really watch and identify with it, if something is convincing, ask yourself why. What are they doing that is allowing for that? If you don't believe it, say that's wrong, that's what I do. How can I correct that? And so that even when you listen to me, you listen for your criticism, not just theirs. Then your participation in every scene will not be just as an audience, but will be an active learning one for each of us. There isn't a mistake that you make that I haven't made over and over and over again. And it is out of acknowledgement of those errors and trying to correct them that we all learn something and grow together.